Hey everyone, I'm Rob. Welcome to the channel, and today we are going to be painting an Imperial Fists Apothecary. I was a bit opportunistic with this because I needed to get this ready at the last minute for an event, a Horus Heresy event that I was going to. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to record the process for you. And we're going to go through the black, the white elements, and the yellow elements, and some of the details as well. So to start off with, we're going to prime our model in lots of different colours. So we're going to prime all the parts that are going to be in yellow. We're going to do that in white. All the parts that are going to be in white, we're going to do that in grey. And all the parts that are going to be in black, we're going to do that in black. And that's just going to make life a little bit easier for us. And we're going to start with demonic yellow. And that's actually going to be our base yellow. So rather than doing any kind of like pre-highlight or pre-shade on this model, I'm just going to go straight up white primer, a few thin coats of the white primer, build it up. I always find that with white, it's always worth building it up. And then this means that our yellow is as bright as it can possibly go. And then what we'll do is we'll spend some time shading it down from there. This is a kind of like a mid yellow. It's one that you can get in a rattle can as well from the Army Painter. So if you don't want to airbrush it, you can always rattle can this. And then we're going to start with some shading. So we're going to use Bullwhacker Brown. This is one of their air paints, so it's not one of the Fanatic range, but there are kind of like equivalent colours. I've just used this one mainly because it is an air paint. It's just slightly translucent, but I have thinned it quite a lot as well. So you can still see the underlying yellow, but this just starts to shade it. And I really like this. So for my own personal Imperial Fists, I use browns to shade the yellows rather than say like something like a hot orange or an orange color. And I think it works great for kind of Age of Darkness, Horus Heresy Marines, but by the end of it, you'll see kind of what it would look like, and then you can kind of be the judge as well. So, I think the other thing is that with this is just be careful. I'm hitting it on the sides and slightly underneath the model, as if a light source is directly coming from the front and from the rear as well to show off the model. But I did go overboard with this brown, but I can neaten it up later on with the demonic yellow. But I'll talk about that when we get to it. Now you could leave the shading just like this. If you're happy with the yellow, then that's absolutely fine. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to deepen the shadows further with this hardened leather color. So this is a speed paint. This is one that I come back to all the time. We're going to use it again for actual leather later on, but I'm actually using it to shade just the darkest recesses of this model. You can see there particularly around the side of the legs, and I'm being more sparing with this than I was with the previous brown that we had used. Again, it's up to you how much of this you use, but I did feel that I went a little bit overboard with the shading, so I do tighten it up a little bit later. If you're doing this on a tank, this would be like in the darkest areas of it. So in the final kind of like 20% of the model, you would use this color rather than using it to shade the whole tank. But it's a lovely, lovely, rich color, and even you can see it's kind of like this, almost this orangey brown color. But I just absolutely love it. I think that it works really, really well with against the yellow. Now, what I need to do is just tighten up the highlights. Now, you could use a transparent color like maize yellow or something like that, which is a speed paint. But the problem with that is that if you want to go correct and you've gone a little bit overboard with your brown, it's then quite hard to correct those. So using a full-bodied color like demonic yellow, which has a bit of bite to it, which is opaque, I would say, goes over black with a couple of thin coats really nicely, and it's clear that it's a yellow. Using this, I think, is slightly better for corrections than using something like maize yellow. Not that you can't use maize yellow, but for smaller infantry models where it's easy to go a little bit overboard with that brown, with the shading, just being able to carefully correct with a opaque color is probably better than using, say, a speed paint. But you could always use a speed paint if you're super, super careful and don't need any corrections. Right, we're going to use matte white next. So we're going to do the white elements. This is just really straightforward. We're going to just start off with a grey primer, and then we're just going to highlight it with our pure white. like with all things, I think that it's really important to thin your white quite a lot because you don't want it to speckle. But as a result, it's very, very thin. So you need to build this up in thin coats. So I would say kind of 4 thin coats got me to where this shoulder pad is right now. And then we're going to do the black element. So we're going to do Scarab Green mixed with Night Sky, 50-50 mix. And this is to match my existing Imperial Fists force. And this is the colour that I usually highlight black with. It's really nice as a contrast to the yellow. It's kind of like this bluey, desaturated blue colour. You could use this, I think, on Dark Angels. I think would work quite well. And you could use it on any black, and I think it would be a nice highlight for that. And then I just added into that cup there a drop of Amulet Aqua, and then I just did a tippity top highlight with that, and then that's the black done. It doesn't need any more than that. That's finished, but you could definitely use that on Dark Angels, for example. I think would be a really nice color. It's going to give like a bluey black look. So next up, we're going to do some edge highlighting here. I tried to be quite careful with the edge highlights. So you can go in with Demonic Yellow first of all, particularly around the brown. It will appear on the parts of the panel that are in brown, of course, but because it's Demonic Yellow and we used that as the actual kind of yellow color, you won't then see it in your, in those top highlights. But the next one up, I would recommend actually just highlight everything with is Warped Yellow. So that's the next one up in terms of the triad. And then you can add in Ice Yellow just to make it a little bit lighter if you wanted to. Next up, we're going to use Ash Grey. Now, on the box art for this model, there's a really nice like white stripe down the front, and I think that it looks really cool. It's actually on a Sons of Horus miniature rather than the Imperial Fist version, but I thought it looked really cool. So definitely worth taking some time to do this. It needs a steady hand. Just be careful, little by little. It's better to make the stripes smaller and then make it bigger rather than trying to do the sides of it straight away. Start small, then get bigger and bigger until you feel comfortable. But you can use the iconography to help you to kind of identify exactly, to make the stripe even, essentially. And then after we've used that ash grey colour, which is a great colour actually, just for like if you want to highlight white, we're going to come back to it again. It's light enough that it works quite well as a base coat for white. But this is just pure white, and all I'm doing is just filling in this rectangle of ash grey. I'm not kind of worrying too much about kind of like edge highlighting it. I'm just essentially just painting it all white, probably apart from the inner elements of the iconography, the Apothecary iconography. But yeah, I think this is like a really nice touch, that white stripe. But of course, you don't have to do it. I then edge highlighted the shoulder pad with the colours that we actually airbrushed it with, and then just with pure white, I edge highlighted the white elements as well. When I say edge highlight, we're not talking heavy metal style edge highlighting, just the ones that are most pronounced, the most obvious. We're going to use Brigadine Brown next, and we're going to use this as a little bit of chipping. You really don't need a lot of chipping, is what I would say. And sometimes I think less is more, just around the feet, around areas where you think that the paint would chip away. But this Brigadine Brown makes for an awesome colour for chipping for Imperial Fists. Like the combination of that brown colour against the yellow just looks spot on. It looks really nice, I think. So yeah, you could do this with a brush if you just wanted to be a little bit more careful, is what I would say as well. Right, let's go to the oil. So often I say, revisit one of my previous videos to learn how to do oils. What I'm going to do is actually, rather than saying that today, I'm going to actually just walk you step by step through the oil process. So we're going to use a little metal ramekin dish. You can get these off Amazon. They're probably like 10 ramekins in there and a couple of like pipettes, and I think they're about £4 or £5. But if you just search like metal ramekins, they should come up. And then we're going to use Winsor and Newton's burnt umber oil, and then we're going to use some premium odorless white spirit, mineral spirits. I tend to stick with white spirits because they dry quicker than, say, like Sansador. I know lots of content creators kind of like recommend Sansador. I just find that, as a commission painter, as somebody who makes videos from time to time, you're always on the clock. And I don't have 24 hours for Sansador to dry. So the white spirit I just find, is done within, it tends to dry if you're careful and haven't slopped it all over the model within an hour or two. We're going to mix those two together until we got a consistency which is probably just slightly thicker than milk, I think. This is actually too thick, and I knew that if I put it on the model, it wouldn't spread. The capillary action wouldn't be there. It would just, I put it on and it'd be a bit of a blob. So just thin it enough that it's just a little bit thicker than milk. And the other thing I'd say is that it needs to leave behind the oil when it goes onto the model. Now, you'll see what I'm talking about in a moment's time. But with these things, you kind of get a feel for it. So practice makes perfect with these things. And it's difficult for me to give kind of like ratios. Now, I have gloss varnished this model before putting the oils down, and just make sure that gloss is just completely dry. And then what you can see, the gloss varnish just helps protect the underlying paint job underneath. It means that we can wipe it away a little bit easier, but also it helps with the capillary action as well, which is one of the most important aspects. So this just basically, the oils just flow into all the gaps. So say with a wash, obviously we've probably always used washes before in terms of normal acrylic washes, but the thing is that they often stain and we can't clear them up later. The benefit with oils is they go into all those nooks and crannies to be able to pin wash a model. So all these like armor panels, they look separate and it looks nice and neat, but we can wipe it away later, and that's the benefit of having a gloss varnish. It doesn't necessarily stain the underlying model, and we can wipe it away, and it doesn't damage the paint job underneath. You will find lots of people say, oh, you can slap oils onto acrylics and it's fine. That's not my experience. I've actually found that the white spirit is quite harsh against acrylic colors, and when you're trying to clear it up, it can wipe away the underlying paint underneath. But who am I to say who is wrong or right? It's about preference. This is just the way I do it. You can do it this way if you want to, or you can do it your own way. This is just purely about how I would go about kind of how I would go about modeling and hobbying and painting, right? So hopefully this is useful for you. You can get gloss varnishes in rattle cans. You can use car lacquers and things like that. The Army Painter do a great gloss varnish. There are lots of companies that do gloss varnish, but I think that try and find one that is robust and dries relatively quickly. As I say, hobby time is always limited, so we're always on the clock. So make sure you find one that can dry quickly. Right, next up. So, just the cleaning away process. So I just used a cotton wool bud here. This hasn't been dipped in any white spirit at all. I'm just doing the initial clean up. Where I find something just to be a little bit more stubborn, you can always dip this in some clean white spirit and then wipe it away. But basically what I'm trying to do is just neaten everything up here and just leave behind the oils that I've used basically for pin washing. I don't want to leave like a splat or a blob on a armor panel because it will just make it look untidy, and I want this guy to be relatively clean. Like, there is some battle damage on it. I want it to be relatively clean to fit in with the rest of my existing force. And then we're going to use our final finish on it. Now I'm going to use matte varnish and satin varnish. You'll see what that looks like in a moment. But the reason I use those two colors together is I find matte isn't the best finish for Imperial Fists. I find that a kind of a halfway satin and matte is the best way to go about it. But you'll see the yellow and what it looks like in a bit. But it's just personal preference. Right, next up we're going to do the gold elements, and we're going to use a 50-50 mix of greedy gold and rough iron. This makes a really nice kind of like base color for your golds. Right, we're going to use orc skin for this white shoulder pad. Now this has also been finished in our 50-50 matte and satin. So the shoulder pad that you saw there was matte and satin, 50-50 mix of those two combined, and the same with this one. So the whole model is kind of like finished before we do any next steps. What I would say is you can't do this really with a gloss varnish over the top of it. You need to kind of use your varnish and then do the next steps. But just with speed paint, you can do any laurels and then we're going to use blood red spin paint, one that I come back to all the time for any red elements. There's quite a lot of red elements on this in terms of like iconography. There's one on the backpack. There's one on the front that we saw previously when we were doing the white stripe, and there's one on this shoulder pad as well. Just be careful with this. Don't slap it on, because you're going to have to make corrections on the white. So just be super fine brush. You could use some. I think I used magnifying glasses for this one as well. And we're going to highlight that with Raging Rose, which is a cool red. It's essentially a pink, but just works quite well as a highlight for blood red. So you're not highlighting it with an orange. We're going to use pinks essentially. Next up, we're going to use Hardened Leather. So all the leather elements are painted just one coat of white. You don't need to kind of like do a properly like it doesn't need a really thick base coat, or a couple of layers. Just one is fine. You can have some of the yellow bits showing through, and you could even do this over the yellow, but I think that it probably just looks better with a white base coat. So I've used Hardened Leather over the pad on his right hand side and on the gun holster on the left hand side, and then I wait for that to dry, and then I did a second coat as well. Again, Hardened Leather is a paint that I come back to all the time. Blood Red is a paint that I come back to all the time. Just massively useful to have in the arsenal. I can definitely recommend them. And you can see how versatile it is. We used it for armor, and now we're using it for leather. Grim Black. So all the soft armor joints I painted white at the same time as painting the leather elements. And then here I'm just going to go and use Grim Black to paint these soft armor joints. You can paint them silver if you want to, but sometimes you just think that actually soft armor joints are probably going to be rubberized because they're moving, and that's it. That's all you need to do for soft. Nobody's going to look at your model and go, "Oh, your soft armor joints are not highlighted," if you're not entering a competition, right? And this just highlights them enough to make it look believable, and you've spent a little bit of time highlighting them. So nice little trick, quick trick, that one. Right, next up, so we're going to use that ash grey colour that we used previously, and we're going to do the robes with this ash grey colour. You need to build this up over 2 to 3 thin coats, rather than just one solid thick coat. I think you don't want to lose any details. And then what I'm going to do is add more and more white into the ash grey. So this at the moment is just a mix of ash grey plus that matte white colour. It's just 50-50 mix. And then what I'll do a little bit later is just go straight to pure white with the robe. Now, I think that you might be tempted to do say like a cream color for a robe. We often see Space Marines with like cream tabards. The only thing I would say with an apothecary like this, we've got a yellow apothecary with red details, soon to have blue and green details with some like wires and stuff. There's lots of colors just going on this model already, that I think it's always worth just taking a step back and thinking, okay, for it to look neat and tidy and the composition to be right, maybe the whites that I've used in terms of the armor, let's just copy that for the tabard. So it's you've not got another color within there. So that was my kind of rationale behind just using kind of the whites that we had used and the greys that we use on the other elements, and then I stuck it all together, and this is what it looks like so far. And you can see what I mean. It's actually quite a busy model. Like, it's a really cool model, but it is super busy, and it's made busier by the way that I've gone about painting it as well, which is like one shoulder pad black, one shoulder pad white, head white, a stripe on it. So I think just try and limit your palette when doing an apothecary, and I think that it probably will look better than kind of having lots of different colors. So gunmetal for base coating, and then we're going to use strong tone for just the wash. Really simple. Just make sure that everything is dried before you apply your wash. And you could use dark tone. The reason I didn't use dark tone, which is essentially the black version of their wash is because I've actually run out, so I need to buy some more. So I used strong tone as the nearest alternative. Although strong tone works quite well because it is basically the old color of Devil in Mud. If you're old enough, and you're a millennial or older than that even, and remember Devil in Mud, this is essentially the same color. So super versatile, and just gives that kind of like mucky, grimy look to metallics, which I think ultimately matches the kind of like the oils within this model as well. So we just want it to be consistent, but you could use dark tone, strong tone, whatever your preference is, or whatever you have in stock at home, because this was literally just the one that I had left over after using all my dark tone. And then next up we're going to use shining silver. You can dry brush this, but I've just been a little bit more careful. I've just taken my time because I spent so long trying to make this like neat and tidy that the last thing I want to do is just like slam it with a small dry brush, but then like pick out some like edges and stuff. So I've just used a brush just to pick out some edges. Nothing more than this really. That whole flat panel there, I just pick it out. Just to bring back a little bit of luster to those silvers, but I won't do any more than this. If you feel the need to do some further edge highlights with something like mithril silver, then you absolutely can do that. But that's not, the metallics are not the focus of this model, I think, so you don't need to spend too much time kind of worrying about it. Right, Guardian Green, Emerald Forest, and Electric Lime. So these are the colours that I'm going to use for kind of some of the wires and I guess these like vases or vials is the word I'm looking for, isn't it? So we base coat in Guardian Green, and then we highlight with Emerald Forest, and then we go in with Electric Lime, and then you can pick and choose kind of which parts you want to be this green color. With the Electric Lime, it's super bright, right? So here you can just see me just basically just picking out the corners and just doing some dot highlights here with this Electric Lime color. I have, though, with Guardian Green, Emerald Forest, and Electric Lime, I've actually mixed the triads together here. So Guardian Green is actually a deep green, whereas Emerald Forest and Electric Lime is a vibrant green. So so you are capable and are able to mix between the triads, and that's exactly what I've done here. And actually that's those three colors are my go-tos for if you want like a color that looks like this. And just to say, on those laurel leaves, I've also highlighted it with the Emerald Forest and Electric Lime as well. So you don't have to do that. The speed paint helps you just to have some natural highlights there, but I've just taken it a little bit further. Right, True Blood, this is a war paint kind of effect paint, and then I've just sponged it onto the Narthecium. Again, I kind of want this to look quite neat and tidy. So I didn't want to put any blood splatters on the armor or on the tabard. Just on the Narthecium was enough for me, just to give the hint that he's just seen a battle brother previously, and got the gene seed out or whatever. So the lamp, paint that white, and then we're going to use maize yellow on top of it. And just one coat of maize yellow, and then once that's completely dry, we can use orange tone. You don't want this too thick, so just make sure that and you want it evenly coated as well, is what I would say. But that's enough for the light, really. You don't want to draw too much attention. You could make it blue, I guess. I mean, when I did it, I was like, oh, we've got yellow and yellow there, so you could do it a different color if you really wanted to. And then you can just edge highlight the silver kind of element that protects the light from being splashed. Lots of people ask me about how I do my bases. It's going to be as simple as this. So I'm going to show you the process here. So use whatever kind of like texture paint or sand or whatever that you want to use. It's completely up to you. There's no preference. But I would recommend going with like a ready earth kind of like paint color for your bases if you're going to emulate this one. And we're going to actually use, and this is a bit of a nightmare, this one, but I'm actually going to use weathering powders that are now no longer available. So this is Light Earth from Forge World. This is one I use all the time, and I've basically tried to keep as many pots as possible of this, and whenever I find them, I usually pay an exorbitant price for them when they come up, because Light Earth is a really, really nice colour. It's kind of like a burnt umber sienna colour, I guess, is what I would say. And then dark sand as well. I'm just going to, if I use light earth all over the base, then I just used a little bit of kind of dark sand, kind of just in patches, I guess. And then I've taken this even lighter one, which is North African dust, which is quite a light one, but I just had in my pot. And this is just like a pot I have in my hobby room, where basically like weathering powders like fall into it, and I can mix things together. And I use 2 old brushes that I only use for weathering powders for that. So yeah, don't use your nice brushes. And then the next thing that we're going to do, we're going to use some white spirit, and you can use a pipette, or you can use a bigger brush or a fan brush for this, something that will hold relatively quite a lot of liquid. And then we're just going to drop that white spirit, that pure white spirit, out of the bottle. Just put your brush in it, and then, or your pipette in it, and then just put it on the base. And that is you're gonna leave that to dry, and then you can add your tufts on. And then that's the base. It really is as simple as that. And then do the rim on the base just to neaten everything up. And essentially that's our miniature. That's our apothecary. Hopefully, I hope this has been of value to you guys. I think the big draws that you should take away from this is about, obviously yellow is an important part. And also composition, I would say. You've got always with apothecaries quite a lot going on, so I think just keep the color palette for it relatively simple, to make it look tasteful. At least that's my thought. And also just a little hint with the blood that he does work. He is an apothecary. You don't need to go absolutely berserk with it, just to give the hint that he is midway through battle. And just with the battle damage, I suggest just less is more, as well. So I think that this is a good example of where we can combine things like edge highlighting, just to keep it like neat and tidy with the world of the Horus Heresy. And that's generally the vibe I've gone for my Imperial Fists. But I hope it has been useful for you guys. If you enjoyed the video, all those things that content creators and YouTube people say at the end, don't forget to like the video, don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to leave a comment if you enjoyed it. And if you've got any questions, I will try and get back to you. See you soon, guys, and see you on the next video.